Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. And the topic of this 10-minute moan is a civil war that's going on inside Reform. I'm trying to look through all the words and noise and point out what's actually happening here and some things that you might have missed. Now, what a few days it's been. I think it started Thursday, we're now into Tuesday, and the volume has just increased and increased and increased. The amount of words written and interviews given is just increasing every day. There's something that should have been dealt completely differently by the party internally. Because not what they're doing now is that infamous phrase, washing their dirty linen in public. So I'll just go over things in chronological order and hopefully point out some things that you may not have been aware of or missed in the deluge of information that's came out. So last Thursday there was an interview given by Rupert Lowe where he said that he was unhappy with some things in the party. He described Nigel Farage as being a sort of messiah type figure, and he made one really telling quote which I picked on straight away, and he said that if the party didn't change, he may not be standing as a candidate come the next election in 4.5 years' time. And that to me was massive, because that told me for that man to have said that, that was planned and quite big, because it explains how bad things must be behind the scenes. And since then, he's since said that when he done that interview, he thought long and hard about whether it was the right time to say what he said. So it evidently was indeed planned. And that gave anybody with a sort of curious mind that questions everything that they see, it sort of pointed that there was obviously splits already in that party. Then what happened next was incredible. Reform on the 7th of March came out with a statement signed by Lee Anderson as the Chief Whip and Mohammed Zia Yusuf, who is the chair of Reform in the United Kingdom. And the first paragraph mentions these complaints, 2 complaints of bullying, both to women and one, in their words, perceived disability issues. And the perception and assumption by a lot of people was these complaints are about Rupert Lowe. However, if you read it carefully, they never ever say that. I'm going to read it to you and show you the statement on screen. It is with regret that we feel obligated to disclose that the party received complaints from 2 female employees after a serious bullying in the offices of the Member of Parliament for Great Yarmouth, Rupert Lowe. It doesn't say who the complaints were about, they just say they happened in the offices of Rupert Lowe. One worked in his parliamentary office, the other in the constituency office. We understand complaints have been made to the parliamentary authorities. I'll come back to the parliamentary authorities in a minute, because that came up again in the last day or so. Now, that doesn't say that Rupert Lowe has had any complaints about him for any bullying. It says that these complaints were for bullying in the office, in 2 separate offices. There's lots of people in Mr. Lowe's team that work between those offices. It doesn't even say if it's from within the office. It could be people, probably highly unlikely, but it could be constituents or other people in the offices who have been unhappy with the way they've been treated by folk who may not even be in Reform. But in no way in this statement does it say these complaints are about Rupert Lowe. Evidence was provided to us of a workplace bullying, the targeting of female staff who raised concerns, and evidence of derogatory and discriminatory remarks made about women, including reference to perceived disability. So again, it doesn't say, now the suggestion is there, and that's what 99.9% of people that read or heard about these complaints jumped on. This must be about Rupert Lowe. But nobody's ever said that. As recently as last night, Nigel Farage done an interview on GB News and was very, very careful not to say that these complaints were about Rupert Lowe. He did say that Rupert Lowe knew about them, but he didn't say they were about him. And that's key to this whole thing. And I've said I'll come back to the Parliamentary Authorities complaint. On X today, one of the ex-users contacted Parliament, Westminster, and asked them if there was any complaints about Rupert Lowe. And they said no. And they provided him with information to show the 4 MPs who have got any parliamentary complaints against them. And Rupert Lowe's not one of them, which is very, very peculiar, because Nigel Farage confirmed that again in an interview since, and doubled down on this fact that, or perceived fact, that Rupert Lowe was subject to some parliamentary complaints. They haven't received any. The other thing that's very peculiar is that on the same day, it says on here, in addition to these allegations of a disturbing pattern of behaviour, Mr. Lowe has, on at least 2 occasions, made threats of physical violence against our party chairman. Accordingly, this matter is with the police. The police, the Met Office, have since confirmed that they had received a complaint on the same day, the 7th of March. But not for any recent complaints, for complaints that happened halfway through December, and indeed 83 days prior to Mr. Yusuf or anyone on the party's behalf making these complaints to the Met Office, because the police didn't receive these complaints until the same day, the 7th of March. I mean, being the 6th actually, the day that the Rupert Lowe interview came out. But it was 83 days. And the police have today announced that they are investigating this. And this seems to be another big thing that people are getting a bit, crazy about. Oh, the police are investigating it. Well, they kind of need to. They're sort of obliged when someone makes a claim, such as threats, that they would investigate it. It's normal course. But it remains to be seen whether anything comes of their investigation. But I find it most peculiar that this man was threatened, such dangerous threats, that he's had to take it to the police. But it took 83 days to make that complaint. And one of the most disappointing thing for me is I made myself clear. In the 3rd of July, I said I could never be a member or support Reform after what they'd done to Scottish Unionists during the election by fielding not only separatist candidates, but one of those was the second in command in Scotland, the deputy chairman, who were indeed Scottish separatists. And one of them had put out, as recently as the February time, a video telling everybody he was a separatist and he wanted his. He said, to be fair, right now is not the time for it because the SNP had made such an arse of Scotland, but in the future he still wanted an independent Scotland, and indeed was advocating for a referendum, a second referendum in the future. I think it was 2039, which was also on Reform UK's website for a long period of time until certain members complained about it and they removed it. So that's Reform for me. I can't support them. But I've always said, I wish them well down south. But I find it difficult to say that anymore. And one of the biggest reasons I feel that the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands indeed, of people that supported them in the rest of the United Kingdom, I feel they've been let down. Because they've seen this as a great white hope, this vehicle that was going to break the duopoly. But unfortunately now, it looks as if the only way they would break the duopoly is by forming a triopoly of useless parties. And Lee Anderson's an inspiration to me as a politician who was just a normal guy. And he said things and he talked in a manner which was similar to mine. The only difference would be our accents. And he actually inspired me to, amongst other things, but he was a big inspiration in me standing for election for Holyrood next year in May 2026. That'll never change. But what will change is his actions will make me redefine who I see as inspirational characters going forward. Because his behaviour has been a bit odd as well and off-putting. he signed as the party whip this statement that went out on the 7th, and he's made some strange comments. He made one in particular where he was having a pop at Lowe for not respecting the investigation. And I thought, by speaking publicly about that, you put out a statement making us all aware of it several days before it, and have since made lots of comments about it. Indeed, the very day he was having a pop at Lowe, he was highlighting this investigation into bullying. And you think, well, that's kind of double standards. You're saying he can't talk about it, but you're the person that put it in the public domain, and have since made lots of comments about it. That, to me, is not showing respect to an independent investigation either. Complete opposite. Investigation, any internal independent investigation, could have been kept quiet as it was right up until the 7th of May. And that brings me on to another recent topic. And that's last night. Nigel Farage, in another car crash interview, claims that Rupert Lowe was well aware about these investigations since the 29th of February. For those of you who are quick thinkers will realise 29th of February, it's not a leap year. There was no 29th of February. But let's just say he made a mistake and it's the 28th. So that means you made other people, including Rupert Lowe, at least a week before you made this public statement. Why? If you want to tell people about this investigation right away, you'd have done it a week earlier. And it just stinks, and this whole thing was just a way of hitting back Rupert Lowe. So how do I think this will pan out? Well, I think the only way it can pan out, regardless of the outcome of these investigations, two of now, the bullying claim, which isn't in Parliament, by the way, but that's dealt with internally, and the threats, which is with the police. There's three outcomes of that. They could both be put in the bin, they could both be right, or one could be right and one could be wrong. Now, it doesn't matter what outcome. If there are negative outcomes for Rupert Lowe, and he is indeed guilty of any of these complaints, then he would no longer be in reform. If some of these complaints are totally unfounded, at least one, if not two, then Rupert Lowe is a guy. Can he stay in reform? So I think that's the only outcome, regardless of how we get there, that I can't see a set of circumstances that he would remain with reform. Because let's be honest with you, the reform's constitution, which was sold as being democratic, the ultimate power lies in a body of people, a committee, where some of the places on that are able to be voted on by members. But whoever is the leader can pick the rest, and can always pick more than can be voted on by the members. So he holds the power in the highest level of the party. And they can't be sacked. Can't happen. There is no way of actually getting the guy sacked. It's impossible. So the members can't do anything, despite it being sold as democratic. So the only way that Nigel Farage doesn't and steps down as the chairman is if he decides. There is no other vehicle in that party to remove him. And I don't really have a big issue with that. If that's the way you've set your party up and people join it, well aware that that's how it is, then that's their choice. But that's not the situation we're in. We find ourselves in a situation where it's sold as this democratic thing. But it plainly isn't. And up until now, and listen, I'm open-minded, things could change. But right now, after 4 or 5 days of this nonsense, the only person involved that I have any faith in whatsoever is Rupert Lowe. I think Mohammed Zia Yusuf, when I trust him as far as I could throw him. Farage, and again, I quite like Farage. A lot of things I disagreed with him. You're allowed to do that, by the way, in the world. You're allowed to disagree with someone and still like them. It's not a problem. Some people have a problem with that theory, but I'm quite happy with it. But now, nah. The comments, the way you're discussing things, nah, you're off my card. And the one that really hurts me is Lee Anderson, because he was an inspiration to me. That's one of the biggest reasons I'm standing for election in Holyrood, was Lee Anderson doing it in Westminster. And I thought, there's a normal guy that's got a place at the table that can make a difference to his community. And he's just really, really went down. And Rupert Lowe I was quite neutral on previous to this. But I'm like, oh, good. And the only other person who's not really involved, he's in the periphery of all this, is Ben Habib. And I'm looking forward to next week. I'm at an event that both I and Ben Habib are talking at. And I'm really looking forward to, I hope we have time for even a 5-minute chat, because I really look forward to hearing that man and speaking to him face to face. I'll be really honoured to do that, and I look forward to it. So this video, if you want others to hear what I've said in this video and watch this video, just do one of 3 things. Click a thumbs up, that helps. Leave comments or hit the share button. Doing either or all of those help the algorithm to push the video into other people's timelines. So please do that. And if you've not already done so, please consider subscribing and hitting the notifications bell for the channel. The most important thing of all, unless you are the type of people that have given good British patriots and unionists faith and are blowing that faith and hope, then not you. But everyone else, have a great day. Cheerio, bye now.